So if someone's coming to me and they want to be in the 1V and they're currently in the 2V, I'd say, okay, well, what would someone in the 1V do? Right. And you can probably see what people in the 1V are doing. They're doing extra meters. They're, sticking around after practice to cool down on the bike. They're coming in before weights to get warmed up. Whatever it is, right? They trained on their own over break. That I think that would be my starting point. Okay, well, what would a person who is in that boat do? What do you think? And then you can go a step further and say, what does a person in the winning 1v8 at the CAA championship do? What would that person do? Right? And I think that gives you a better idea of how to choose your actions moving forward.
What was I gonna say? Hold on, let's restart. I messed up. I don't even know where I was going. I don't even know where I was going with that. All right, ready, Rock?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, let's do it. So for everyone listening, we have, I guess number five on the podcast, Delaney McGuire, recurring guest, one of my good friends, coach for Eastern Michigan University, and someone who, for all the frequent listeners, you've probably heard, Delaney on this podcast numerous times. Some of my favorite episodes, and the perfect person to have on as we enter 2025. It's January 2nd. This will probably come out, early next week. So the 6th or 7th. But we are here January 2nd, 2025. And I'm pumped for a new year. I know Delaney is. We were just chatting a little bit about what's coming up with her season out of Eastern Michigan. But with that, as always, Delaney and I just love chatting and talking rowing. And the best part about having this platform and the podcast is, we can just have our normal conversations that we have all the time whenever she's back in Philadelphia, and put it on a more, public forum for other people to listen in on. But we got some fun topics that we're going to dive in today, notably talking about what's cooking out at Eastern Michigan coming out of the recruiting shutdown for all the individual athlete, or for all the high school athletes who are getting into the recruiting process, or maybe you are in the recruiting process, right? As you start the new year, what are some things that you can start to apply to, really stay on offense in the recruiting process? That's the way I kind of like to think about it, staying proactive, getting emails out, things like that. So we'll dive into that, but then also a lot of the fun things we'll talk about are just habits for training, things that athletes can start to think about, things that work for us in terms of just, okay, well, you have this new year, you have a season coming up, or if you're a master's rower, right, you're still trying to bridge the gap in training. If you're a high school rower, you're trying to get ready for spring racing season. Maybe you have some 2K opportunities, whatever it may be. And Delaney and I talk about this stuff naturally all the time because we're both workout junkies who love training and exercising and sticking to routines and whatever it is. So we're going to kind of spend a good chunk of today diving into some of the things that do work for us as well, and that maybe you can apply to your own rowing journey. But without further ado, Delaney, why don't you kick things off? We'll kind of focus a little bit on just, you just arrived back in Michigan from visiting home in Philly, but what's going on, right? Season starts on Monday. Just came out of a little bit of a recruiting pause, kind of a new NCAA type legislation that kind of came into effect. And you're probably getting ready for what sounds like a pretty promising spring season. So kick things off for us.
Yeah, I'm so excited for this year. It's always nice to get a break, during the holiday. And I always feel like coming out of it, I'm just eager, to get going again. So I'm excited for Monday. Our first practice back, first day of school in the spring semester. And yeah, like you said, we just came off, well, I guess today is kind of the last day of our first time trying out a recruiting shutdown in rowing. And I have to say it was pretty nice. I don't know how the high school athletes felt about it, but I think from the coaches I've talked to, it took a lot of stress and guilt over, I need to be responding to emails while I'm spending time with my family out of the holiday season, which for me, I really enjoyed. So, and I'm also now I'm excited to talk to everybody again and see how everybody's holiday was and, what's going on in the new year. So we'll be spending some time over the next couple of days getting back through email and questionnaires. I know we've already got a bunch. I've got some stacked up in my inbox. So those juniors out there that are listening, I think everybody is probably doing the same thing over the next couple of days. So be patient. People are going to be getting back to you soon. So
And
yeah,
just to be clear on that front, this is right. This wasn't something Eastern Michigan specific. This is all NCAA rowing. Is it D1? Is it obviously D3? I think has their own kind of natural things kind of in place. But
yep,
what right? This was a Division 1 NCAA mandated shutdown for recruiting for what, like
yep.
2 weeks, I think. And this is
Yeah,
something
10
that
days.
right. Okay. So, and this is something that wasn't in effect prior to this year. It's kind of a new thing. So
Yep.
for the athletes out there listening, every coach probably went a couple of days, couple of weeks, right? As long as they kind of honored the what was in place without getting back to you in some capacity. So talk a little bit about like, where do you even feel like that was a necessary thing to kind of put into place? Do you feel like that was a positive thing for, you already talked about how it was a positive thing for you as a coach, but the landscape of recruiting as a whole, do you feel like that's something that kind of gets a little bit of energy back into the coaches where they don't feel like they're answering emails on, New Year's Eve when they're trying to spend some time with friends and family and this, whatever it may be? How do you feel like that
Yeah.
affected or, how do you feel like that turned out as a new implementation in recruiting?
Yeah, I think looking at the landscape of other Division 1 sports, when you look at recruiting calendars, we were the only sport up until this year that had no shutdown period or dead period, other than during the NLI signing period, which is universal. It's like a 3-day, 2 or 3 day dead period during the signing period. Every other sport had these usually about maybe 4 days to a week long period, multiple times a year for some sports, where it is a shutdown or a quiet period or a dead period. And rowing didn't have any of that. So I think it was a really good move as a sport to push for something like that, both for us and for the athletes, because prior to this year, recruiting was basically 363 days a year, right? And I think for some coaches, like when, that's all that you have going on in your life, yeah, you're answering recruiting emails on Christmas morning and, but I think a lot of coaches have families, have, other obligations that they want to be able to focus on during that time. So I think as an overall, it was a great move by the sport. We work hard all year. We have the longest season of any NCAA sport. We have the most permitted practice days of any sport. So I think it's well earned to get, 10 days where we can just decompress and reset, and get ready to go for the new year.
And do you feel like, because I think one of the things that like, and I experienced this when I was a college coach as well, it's like recruiting is one of those things where it's a never ending feeling of, in many ways, you're being reactionary, right? It's all just reactionary. Like, hey, I'm getting an email. I have an athlete visiting campus. I have this and that. And obviously, when you're away from campus, right? Like you coming out to visit family in Philadelphia, other coaches going back to maybe where they're rooted and going home over the holidays. There's some things that are naturally not occurring all the time, right? Athletes visiting campus, this and that. But also the countless emails that are coming in, the feeling that you have to set up a meeting as soon as possible because this is when the athlete is available. Some of that goes, is kind of it is necessary sometimes to kind of have that forced break, and for them to kind of implement that for you makes you feel a little bit less guilty in the process for kind of taking that commitment to yourself. And I feel like you touched on this before, but how about from the athlete side of, okay, like I sent an email on December 22nd. I still haven't heard from the coach. We're now in 2025. Why haven't I heard from them? This and that. How do you feel like, or how would you talk to that athlete in terms of just being like, hey, like, take a minute, right? It's okay. Like it's winter break. They have lives outside of just answering emails. Like they're going to get back to you at some point. The question is when, right? So how would you talk to those athletes or tell those athletes who are maybe waiting on a response or a phone call or this or that?
Yeah. I would say just have some patience over the next couple of days because I think this is our first time going through this. So The one thing about it is that things will pile up over the course of 10 days, and it's going to take us a little bit of time to, intentionally go through and get responses out to everybody who tried to get in touch over the last 10 days. So be patient. A lot of us, we start on Monday, but I think a lot of programs have yet another week or two until they start. So I think, most coaches are probably going to use this next 2 weeks as a catch up, and start scheduling calls and getting emails out and text messages out. So, I'm sure you'll hear back, in the next 2 weeks. And if you don't, I think it's completely appropriate to follow up at that point. And just give another nudge and acknowledge, like, hey, I know it's been a busy couple of weeks coming into the new year. Would still love to connect. That's, I don't think, going to bother any coaches. In fact, it might be helpful. You never know if your email might have just gotten lost in the shuffle, and it's nice to like get your name back on the top of the inbox list. So, but give it. I would say give it a week, give it 2 weeks. Let coaches get through, what they've got going on, and then get back in touch if you feel like you need to.
Yeah, and one of the things that I've been telling a lot of athletes who I talk to on a consistent basis is the number one, coaches' communication skills vary monstrously from some who are very good at communicating, others who you send an email and it's been 3 months and they haven't gotten back to you. Like there are coaches who maybe that isn't their main skill set, right? Which is email communication and constantly getting back. So you got to give them the benefit of the doubt, right? Everyone's got strengths and weaknesses, just like we do as individuals. So whether it's a recruiting shutdown or not, that's a good philosophy just in recruiting in general. Don't be afraid to send an email. Don't be afraid to follow up. And that's where I talk about always playing offense, where it's like, if you're just playing defense and you're waiting, right? You're waiting for them to kind of get back to you. You're waiting for them to see your questionnaire. You're going to be missing out, right? Months are going to go by because they're constantly getting messages from athletes who are playing offense, who are genuinely interested in those programs. And I think that's a big thing for athletes to kind of realize, where it's like, hey, like coaches aren't going to look at you differently because you send an email 2 weeks later or 3 weeks later, right? You're taking control of your own path, and you're just nudging that coach to be like, oh, I forgot that email came into my inbox. And that's just natural, right? More people should do that in all aspects of life, where it's just like, hey, just don't be afraid to send an email. Don't be afraid to see, don't be annoying. Don't send it every day, right?
Right.
But don't be afraid to send an email. Or if 2 weeks have gone by and you have their phone number, follow up with a text, be like, hey, coach, hope, like one of the things I've been telling athletes over Christmas and New Year's, right? Because I talk to a lot of athletes during this time because they are on break, right? A lot of high school athletes are on break, or all of them are on break in some capacity over this time. So I've had a lot of meetings with them. And one of the things I tell them is the easiest email on planet Earth to send to a college coach or someone who you perceive as someone you don't want to, right? Like just a little bit of intimidating because they're a coach or whatever it may be. The easiest email on planet Earth to send is a happy 2025, wishing you well as you embrace or as you go into the new year. Good luck with the start of the spring semester. Check, right? Put it on the email that you sent in early December, right? That they haven't gotten back to, and just send them another email being like, hey coach, just reaching out. Happy New Year. Hope you got some time to relax over these last couple of weeks. Wishing you well as you and the team prep for an amazing spring season. Done, right? Your name is now at the top of the inbox, right? That easy, right? So I think that's just something that athletes can kind of take with them. But with that, Delaney, just for athletes who maybe are, and we wanted to talk about this a little bit too, like it's New Year, New Year's, right? Kind of a new clean slate on the calendar, at least. And a lot of people use that as an opportunity to make changes or, behavior changes, habits, whatever it may be. For athletes or for parents who are listening to this and have aspiring college rowers at some point in their near future, whether they're a current junior, a current senior who's a little bit late to the game or still navigating things, whatever it may be, right? What are some tangible things that you would say, right, as we kind of, finish up kind of chatting a little bit about on the recruiting front, what are some tangible things that maybe athletes can start to think about as they embrace this new clean slate and begin to truly dive into communicating with coaches and getting conversations started?
Yeah, fill out recruiting questionnaires. That's always my first one. It's the easiest one. But I will piggyback off of that and say usually filling the questionnaire out might not always be enough. Follow up that questionnaire with an email. Introduce yourself. Let the coach know you filled out the questionnaire. I have questionnaires set to come into my email inbox, but everybody might not have that same setup, right? Like they might not even see it come in until they log into whatever database they're using. So send an email, follow up, follow on social media, right? Follow the team on social media, follow the coaching staff if the coaching staff has social media. And then the other one that actually has just come to mind to me recently, because I've been kind of going through it with some early on recruiting emails. I think if you're really looking to get response from a program you're really interested, email the recruiting coordinator first. A lot of athletes email head coaches, and a lot of head coaches are very they put recruiting on like the second tier of their email. I know, like in my experience, Kemp is pretty good. He'll usually respond and copy me and just say like, "Hey, I've copied our recruiting coordinator," and pass it off to me anyway. So I think recruiting coordinators are going to be the ones that are going to be most on the lookout for the messages. They're going to be wanting to organize who on the staff is going to reach out to you directly, because it might not be me. I might pass it off to our other assistant, Lucy, or I might pass it to Kemp. Like if it's someone that I'm like, hey, you know what? You need to talk to her right now. She sounds like a great athlete for our program. But I think recruiting coordinators more than likely are the first line of defense for the program. So I would go directly, go on program website, look up the staff. If there's no recruiting coordinator listed, usually whatever assistant coach is listed first is probably that person. They're probably handling that. And then that leaves a clear path for the staff in that way. So
Yeah, and a couple of things I want to piggyback off of. Like I love the social media one, right? Like follow their social media, right? Like we've had coaches come on here and be like, hey, like I'm getting DMs from some athletes about social, on social media, on Instagram, obviously. Like number one, follow the program. And we've talked about this before on previous podcasts, but like when you follow the program on Instagram, especially if you're a junior and you may not be having like the traction of conversations all the time because it's a little bit early for a lot of coaches to be kind of contacting, certain athletes. One of the things that you can think about is, okay, like just the best way to educate yourself is going on social media, following the team, getting an understanding of the personality, which is actually way better than even the website, right? Because like you're starting to see like, okay, like are they going on any, early January winter training trips? What's the dynamic of the team as they kick off winter training? Are they erging? Are they doing circuits and cross? Like you can see all that on social media. So that's a huge one. And then also bridging off of that, the coaches' social medias, I think is a massive one too. Because a lot of them have social media accounts now and coaching specific, rowing specific. You have one, obviously. So check that out, right? And you can actually start to see like, okay, like what do the first couple of weeks of their winter season actually look like? What are they doing, right? Are they doing a lot of erging? When are they doing testing? Do they have any fun trips planned? This and that, right? And you can start to see that through the eyes of what the coach is distributing on social media. So I think that's a huge one. Piggybacking off on another point that you made, right, with emailing the recruiting coordinator, that's a huge one too, right? Because a lot of times they send it to the head coach, and the head coach has to deal with 100 different things before they get to, the junior in December who, is emailing them and isn't on the priority list in terms of what they need to do in that particular phase of getting started with the team and compliance and scheduling. And are we in season hours or off season hours? Are we going on a winter training trip? That email is going to get buried very quickly, right? versus emailing the recruiting coordinator, where on the priority list, it's much higher, right? You're going to see that. And it may not be priority number one, right? It's kind of like team first, right? Kind of, if you get an email from an athlete who wants to meet, you may meet with them first, or maybe vice versa. I don't know, right? Everyone's a little bit different. But a lot of athletes actually email like the bottom one, right? Which is usually like a volunteer assistant coach who has an email set up just so that they're in the system, but they don't check. They check it once, quarter, because they also have a real job and real email and this and that, right? So that's what you want to kind of stay away from. And I think a lot of people gravitate to that because they want the lowest barrier of entry, and they feel like that's going to be the kindest email to send because that coach is at the bottom. So it's like, okay, they're still a coach. I'm going to send it to them. And then that email never gets responded to. So I think that's a big one too. The way I always tell athletes, because I am a big advocate of always being on offense when it comes to recruiting, is one line, multiple hooks. That's the way I think about it, right? So if it's the recruiting coordinator, like your first email, not all of your emails, but your first email, if the recruiting coordinator is listed, you're sending it to and you're addressing it to the recruiting coordinator, right? That's your line, right? With the main hook. And then you're copying on maybe one of the assistants and even the head coach, right? Whatever, right? Like whether they get 120 emails a day, right? What's one more, right? So one line, two, you as the recruiting coordinator, many hooks. And this is more common than what I would like to see, but on a lot of websites, the recruiting coordinator is not listed, right? So like you said, you can kind of go to whoever's the first listed coach who's not the head coach, right? Or send it to the head coach, address it to the head coach, but copy the other coaches on there. The recruiting coordinator is going to arise somewhere, right? They're going to be the one who responds and be like, hey, so-and-so, thanks for reaching out. I'll take it from here. I'm the recruiting coordinator, right? So those are things
that's a great point. Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is actually something I always tell our staff, especially we've had some new assistants the last couple of years. So it's been like a new person plugging in. And I always try to mention, like, double check when you get an email into your inbox, look and see if like I'm on it, if Kemp's on it, or if it was just directed to you. Still ask, like, send me a text, send Kemp a text. Hey, did this person reach out to you too? It's interesting. I've been seeing some athletes who will send a direct line to the head coach, a direct line to me, and then another direct line to Lucy. And I would say exactly what you said. Don't do that. Do one email, put everybody on it. Because like you said, more than likely, I'm going to see it. More than likely, I'm the one who's going to say, hey, everybody saw that email, right? And everyone's going to say, yep. And from there, I'll be like, okay, I'm going to respond. Or, hey, Lucy, why don't you respond? But when you send individual emails to each coach on staff, it gets confusing for us because sometimes, that third or fourth assistant assumes like, oh, wow, this person just reached out to me. I'm going to, and they're eager to do work and they're going to respond. And oh my gosh, I also responded. And now we look silly and that's why I always tell our staff, like, we always have to double check because some athletes are doing that. They are sending individual lines to each of us. But yes, I would 100% recommend exactly what you said. Email the recruiting coordinator and copy everybody else on it.
Yeah, no, I think that's huge. And again, like, I think one of the things, and I'm sure you agree with this, but it's like at the end of the day, like, and I'd be curious to hear, it's like at the end of the day, like, and I'm speaking more towards, again, those later on in their high school career and they're starting to be actively interested in college rowing. Like at the end of the day, like, send an email, right? Like, get in contact with someone, right? Like, then that to me is my primary method of communication, right? Like, if I'm getting something, right? Some are different. I prefer not a text, mostly because that text message gets lost in a pool of everything from personal to business to professional to whatever it may be, right? Like, so an email, I can kind of see it when I'm ready to see it. But I think at the end of the day, whatever your preferred medium is, send emails, right? Play offense, right? And I think that's a good message to all the athletes as they enter 2025. It's like, hey, like, if you've been hesitant to send an email or you feel like you sent it to the wrong person or this or that, like, revisit it, go check it out, and then send another email. Happy New Year. Hope you're all is well. Good luck this spring. Bang, name on top of the inbox. But what are your thoughts on that front? Last thing on the recruiting front before we talk a little training.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. You can't be afraid to contact coaches and to follow up. Um, because, just like you said, a lot of times things get a little lost in the shuffle, certain parts of the year, right? And it doesn't mean that we don't want to talk to you. It doesn't mean that, we just deleted the message and moved on. So, always follow back up, especially if it's a program that you're really interested in. And if you find that the message you receive back is one of, we're not really looking for an athlete of this speed, this height, whatever it might be, don't be afraid to follow that back up and say, okay, what do I need to do? If it's something that you can have control over, if programs are being selective based off of height, unfortunately, there's not a whole lot you can do there, but you might still be able to make a case for yourself, erg score wise. Like, okay, I know I'm short, but is there a score if I hit that you would be interested in? If it's a program that you're really, it's like one of those dream opportunities. B, I love athletes that are invested in themselves in the recruiting process, that I don't have to chase around, that are interested in learning about Eastern, interested in the sport of rowing. We do a lot of recruiting of athletes that don't row, but the ones that show a vested interest in, like, oh, cool, I saw that you guys did this workout on Instagram yesterday. Like, what is that? Can you tell me about it? And I'm like, yeah, yes, I can. That's super cool. So, there's a lot of avenues to show your interest. So be creative and be your own best advocate, because nobody else is going to advocate better for yourself than you.
I love that. That's and I think even like to the athletes who are maybe not quite at that level today, it's like, number one, you got the process started. You sent an email, right? Like the ball was in their court and they delivered you some information, and whether it's good information that you want to hear or bad information that means maybe they're not interested in you at this stage, like any information is better than no information, right? And then following up with that, it's like, okay, well, is there a path? Right? I tell this a lot, especially on the men's side, right, where the opportunities are a little bit more limited for D1 opportunities, where it's like, okay, well, maybe a good follow-up question is, okay, well, what, like you said, right, are there erg standards that you need to hit? And whether or not there is or isn't, the other follow-up question to kind of say is like, okay, like also, are there potential alternative paths to be able to row on for the program? Are there walk-on opportunities? Are there things like that, okay, you may not be in the recruiting pool at that stage, right? Maybe it is a little bit, of a different tier for where you are today. Not to say it's where you will be 2, 3, 4 years from now, or even 6 months from now when you're entering campus. But is there an alternative path that you could follow to maybe to have both, right? The school that you want and also have rowing as part of your life, just maybe in a walk-on format, which you know how I am with walk-ons, right? There ain't nothing wrong with that, right? Like, so
Yeah.
I think that's another big one too. That coaches can, or that athletes can think about. So, but again, at the end of the day, I can't stress enough: play offense, right? Send the email, be active, and your last point was the best, right? You're the best advocate for yourself, right? You know how to advocate for yourself. Like, send those emails. So with that, I wanna turn the page a little bit, right? And thinking about, okay, we are here in 2025, and I think a couple of things that would be fun to kind of spend the second half of our conversation about or talking about is like just one of our favorite topics to talk about: training and rowing, erging, whatever it may be, development, performance, right? All these different things. And I think what I think that, hey, like, New Year's does offer an opportunity to wipe the slate clean and begin to create a path that is maybe a little bit different than the path that you followed till December of last year, right? Like, you have this built-in opportunity, right? And yeah, like, there's going to be people who are, hey, I don't believe in that or this or that. It's like, at the end of the day, like, whatever works for you. But for college athletes, right, your athletes, right, in that you're going to be seeing again in a couple of days, or the athletes who are in high school and trying to get to that level, right, where they're rowing Division 1, it's an incredible opportunity to have that mindset of wipe the slate clean, move forward. Why? Because it's the break in the semester, right? And yeah, you've already had 1 or 2 weeks of winter break, but now you are a week away, maybe even more for some teams, from being back on campus and having this new fresh opportunity to maximize your current year, right? To change your trajectory, to do this and this, right? And that's something that I'm really passionate about, where it's like, hey, like you have this built-in opportunity to kind of develop new habits and, focus on different things that can help better position you for a great spring season or to get recruited or whatever it may be. But I think that's going to be a fun thing. But my first question for you, Delaney, is like, okay, for your athletes and how this will branch out to athletes all over the country who are listening to this, but for your athletes in particular, like if an athlete came to you and was like, hey, I really want to, make this boat this year, and it's here in the beginning of the semester, and we have winter training coming up. We may have a trip built in, right? I know you guys go to, I think, Alabama and spring break, right? What are you telling those athletes who come to you and are like, hey, like fall maybe wasn't the season, the year, or the semester that I was hoping for, and I want to change the trajectory a little bit as I head into this new year. I want to really flip the script and better position myself to make that boat that I thought I was going to be in October. What are you telling those athletes?
So something that I think I read, I forget if I read it in a book or heard it on a podcast, but someone who said, like, you don't have to wait until you're a champion to act like one. And I kind of like that idea as in general for anything, right? Like you don't have to wait to act like a 1v8 athlete. Like you don't have to wait until you're in the boat to act like one. Like you can start acting like someone who is in the 1v8 now if you're in the 3v8 or 4v8 or the novice 8, whatever, right? And I know you read Atomic Habits, right? Great book if anybody's looking for, something to kickstart good habits in the new year. But he talks about asking yourself, like, what kind of person would do this thing, right? Like, so if someone's coming to me and they want to be in the 1V and they're currently in the 2V, I'd say, okay, well, what would someone in the 1V do? Right. And you can probably see what people in the 1V are doing. They're doing extra meters. They're, sticking around after practice to cool down on the bike. They're coming in before weights to get warmed up. Whatever it is, right? They trained on their own over break. That I think that would be my starting point. Okay, well, what would a person who is in that boat do? What do you think? And then you can go a step further and say, what does a person in the winning 1v8 at the CAA championship do? What would that person do? Right? And like, I think that gives you a better idea of how to choose your actions moving forward, right? If you keep that question in the back of your mind rather than just labeling it as an erg score, because the erg score, it's every year is different, right? The speed that it's going to take to win every year varies a little bit. I mean, you kind of know over long-term trends what it's probably at baseline has to be at, but just focusing on a number outcome isn't always going to get you the full story. I think like people who are successful in any area are successful because of their habits around that activity that they're doing or around the business that they're building or whatever it is, right? Like it's not just one singular thing that makes a person fast at rowing or, good at whatever it might be.
Yeah, and this actually one of the things, and I think I sent this to you in our brief text message exchange prior to logging on here today. But I've been building this in a lot, and you probably heard me say it in the summer a little bit during the summer training program. But I've been saying this a lot over the last probably like 8 months or so. But it's like the athlete 1.0 versus the athlete 2.0, and to be a Division I athlete, right, at the college level, right, like to be a Division I college rower, there's a certain barrier that you have to kind of cross in order to be an athlete at that level, right? Like you're dedicating 20 hours a week plus to best position yourself to be in a boat or win a national championship or have this community of hardworking athletes that you love just being with. It's every thought outside of school kind of goes to this one particular thing because it's that passionate or it's that meaningful to you. So the athlete one, like everyone is going to be at that level, an athlete 1.0, right? And the way I describe those athletes is you show up every day, you're on time, you are going 100% in every practice. You are do everything the coaches ask. You are a great coachable athlete on the water, during practice, at lift, whatever it may be, right? So 95% of athletes are going to be at that athlete 1.0 threshold, right? They're at that athlete 1.0 position, right? Yeah, again, there's going to be like that 5% that drive you crazy. Neither here nor there, right? And maybe aren't, could be, but aren't, right? But most athletes are going to be at that athlete 1.0. The athlete 2.0 is the athlete who is stretching after practice, are dedicated to, getting in mobility work, on their own. They are thinking about recovery. They're thinking about nutrition. What are they putting into their body? They're getting to bed probably at the same time every day, regardless of whether they have a final exam the next day in school, right? They're managing their time throughout the day in order to best position themselves where they can go to practice, be 100%, and get some appropriate time for studying and all the things they need on the academic front. They are thinking about, they're taking strength training seriously. They're showing up on time, right? Kind of treating it as a true rowing specific session. They're asking questions after practice. They're meeting with their coaches, at different times to kind of address goals and, different technical things, right? So that's the athlete 2.0 that I think is very, to your point of, okay, if I'm trying to look at the athletes who are making the 1V, or are in the top boats at my conference championships, what are they doing away from the boathouse? What are the habits that they're creating away from the boathouse? What time do they wake up before a 6 a.m. practice? Are they walking in there half asleep, or are they walking in there with, 30, 40 minutes of, true wake up and with a cup of coffee and this and that, and they're ready to rock and roll, right? Thinking about that, like that's the athlete 2.0, right? It's the things that you do away from the boathouse, away from the erg room to help better position yourself where that time commitment at practice is even better maximized, right? They're doing the extra work like you talked about. So I think that's a big thing for people. It's like, hey, like if I never set aside 10 minutes, a couple times a week to focus on stretching, right? Recovery, right? Okay, that's an easy break into being that athlete 2.0, right? It's low hanging stuff that you can start to implement. If I never had a consistent wake up time for practice and I'm hitting the snooze button sometimes 3 times, sometimes 6 times, right? Waking up my roommate, okay, I'm going to commit to creating a better habit of waking up on that first alarm, right? Maybe my phone's on the opposite side of the room, so I have to get out of bed to go get it and turn it off, right? So I think for a lot of athletes, again, this is high school athletes, college athletes, you name it, masters athletes, anyone, really. A lot of this stuff is applicable to anyone. It's creating an opportunity to think about that athlete 2.0, right? And what are some of the easy ones, right? And I think you can't incorporate all of them all the time, but you can incorporate one or two, right? Okay, I'm going to wake up at 5:30 for 6:15 practice rather than my normal 6 o'clock one, right? I'm going to commit to 3 15-minute stretching routines per week after practice, right? I'm not going to rush off and get to the dining hall, right? I'm going to sit there and focus on a little bit of mobility work to help better position me for the next day. 2, right? Now you have 2, right? Maybe someday you can stack in another one, but now you start to create some of those habits. So that's a big one for me. What are some things that you think about in terms of like just that athlete 2.0 and things that maybe those athletes do specifically, that you've been aware of, where it's like, okay, these athletes take it a little bit more seriously in the hours that they are away from the house. What do you think about that?
I really like your point about the waking up just a little bit earlier before practice. Something that I really noticed, and it was something we talked about this summer at camp, but like the energy in the morning, right? Like when you're walking in the door, I've started to really take notice of like who is actually ready upon walking in the door, not upon like putting their feet in the foot stretchers. Like I'm talking about like you walk in the door and you can tell this person's awake, they're excited to be there, they're bringing good energy, right? Versus like, and everybody's got this. You've got the people on the team who walk in the door half asleep. They look miserable. They look pissed off to be there. And like, how is that helping anyone? Right? It brings my mood down because when I say good morning to you and you like don't respond to me, I'm like, what the heck? Like, I'm just trying to be nice in the morning, right? And it affects your teammates, right? Like no one wants to get in the boat with the person who is still waking up during the warm up. So I think getting up just a little bit earlier can impact that energy. Like you said, like get some fuel in before practice, which is important, right? Athlete 2.0 is making sure that they're fueled properly for the upcoming session. And we know you have to fuel. Like we're not a sport that's like you can wake up and work out on nothing if we're, training for performance. So fuel for the session. If you need coffee, have coffee, whatever it is, right? But when you come in the door, bring energy. And I think the only way to do that is you do have to have been up for a little bit, right? It takes a little bit early in the morning. You have to give yourself some time to like wake up and get into it. So that I think is a really big one. Other ones that I've seen are just, like you said, all the things you've hit on. Taking the time to stay after practice and ask a coach a question. A big one for us, logging your workouts. So we use the app Crew Lab as a team to keep track of data. However, I think there's a step further to that of like writing your stuff down. We give the team a binder where they have sheets where they can record their stuff. Usually we start that in January. So for our training in like November on the erg, we don't usually have recording sheets for it. But I did notice like a big group of athletes, like they're going over, they're grabbing their binder and they're just writing it down on blank paper or whatever. Keeping track of your training, that's something that Athlete 2.0 does because you can start to notice trends, through the years of training. And it's also great to be able to go back and look at like, wow, remember freshman year when, this split was so hard on this workout and now look at how much faster I am now, right? It gives you that proof of the training's working. But other ones, again, like we've touched on, it's warm up and cool down. It's spending a little bit of extra time. And I think going off of the waking up earlier, it is going to bed. It's prioritizing that form of recovery. I just heard something recently again on recovery. Everybody likes to talk about, the cold tub, the recovery boots, this and that, cool recovery gadget, and all that stuff is great, but all that stuff is easy, right? Like that's the easy choice, to go and sit down and put the recovery boots on for 30 minutes. It's easy to hop in the cold tub after practice when, the whole team is there and they're doing it. What's hard is saying no to, someone wanting to do something at 8:00 at night when you've got practice the next morning. That's hard. But that's probably the more beneficial no, right? To go to bed so that you're recovered and rested and ready versus, going out and hanging out with friends, doing whatever later into the evening. Or like you said, studying, staying up all night. The hard choice there is to make the time during the day to study, cutting out that Netflix time, cutting out the screen time on your phone, on social media. Those are things that people who are on that next level are doing because they know how important it is to go to bed and, be recovered for the next session.
Yeah. And I love that, like, especially like, in speaking to just how you manage your time and things like that, right? That's a huge one, right? That, right? Like us as coaches, I was going to kind of say that, like, you can tell the athletes who kind of take ownership of that athlete 2.0 kind of mindset, right? Like, you can tell the athletes that are number one coming in ready, but they're also on the erg, 10 minutes or 5-10 minutes before the workout begins. They are, when they are sitting waiting for the meeting, they're probably doing a little bit of stretching, a little bit of mobility stuff that they understand and know. And it's not that they're doing anything kind of crazy, right? Like, they just have a routine that's worked for them, right? They're probably waking up a little bit earlier, right? Those are the things that you also don't see, right? The waking up, the managing your time. Was this athlete up all night studying, right? Like, and you kind of alluded to it, but it's like, you're always gonna, if you make the time, right, you're gonna find, right, you're gonna give yourself a way more manageable schedule, right? If you just really commit to making the time, right? Okay, like, spending a little bit less time in the dining hall so you can get off to class or get another 30 minutes of studying in, right? Maybe you are managing, if you are trying to do, office hours with a teacher, right? Structuring your time where you can do that, but then you can quickly get off to, right? Like, whatever it may be, right? Like, there's many examples of how you manage your time. But I was having this conversation with one of the athletes a couple weeks ago. Actually, maybe it was like 2 weeks ago in the winter, December training program here in the garage. But I was talking to an athlete, and if she's listening to this, she may call it out because I know she's a fan, especially of our conversations. But they're like, "Oh, I was up all night studying, right? I was up all night studying for because I had this final exam that I had to do, and this and that." And some of these high school kids are million times more talented and dedicated to certain aspects, especially on the academic front, than I ever was, right? So I can't speak to all of it. But what I can speak to is how you manage your time, where it's like, okay, well, are you better being 100% in on the 2 hours that you're here with me versus half asleep? And also, in being in that normal routine, but being a little bit more structured in how you spend your studying time, are you better with a full night's sleep, taking that test at 100%, or where you are right now, which is taking that test at 60% because you slept 2 hours, right? I think that's another one that I think is really interesting. That talk about a lot with, like, the athletes who are, oh, I don't have that much time, or hey, I had to be up all night studying for this exam. It's like, especially in the winter, where the quickest way to derail a season of progress that you want to see, especially on the erg, right? The unforgiving erg, right? The easiest way to derail that is to get sick and be out for a couple weeks. And the easiest way to, or one of the easier ways to make that actually a reality, is by not getting any sleep and not prioritizing recovery. So starting to think like that as you get into the first couple weeks of the semester, where it's like, okay, like, I need to prioritize my sleep a little bit. I want to be 100% all in on practice, right? Because I'm there, right? If I'm going to be there, I might as well be 100% all in. But I also know I got to dedicate considerable time to getting the grades that I need and this and that. So how do I manage that time, right? And the way you probably don't manage it appropriately, because it's gonna affect you in some capacity down the line. There's gonna be some downstream issues from that. Is I have 3 all-nighters in a row because I'm trying to get ready for this, finance exam that I have on Friday, and now all of a sudden I woke up sick and I can't go to practice for 3 weeks. Now I'm mad that my grades are, or now I'm mad that I can't go to practice. It's affecting my studying because I'm sick and this and that. Like, and then it becomes a spiral, and all of a sudden your February is not optimal because your January got off to a rocky start. So those are things that I think are interesting. But I could talk all day about that.
Yeah.
I think those
Yep.
are ones that I think are very applicable. Any last thoughts on that front?
I was just thinking of it as you were wrapping up there, but the best ability is availability, right? Like, to your point, like, be available. The opportunities go to the athletes that are consistently there. And if you're on a team that's already at a high level of consistency and showing up, then obviously, there are other things that there's more that has to be done than showing up. But there are some programs, especially at the high school level, where be at practice. You're going to start getting seats and boats because not everybody's there every day. Be the person that's there. Get the seat, get the opportunity. When I started rowing at Carroll, I was in like the second 8. We had 2 8s, and I'll never forget. Someone was sick on a Saturday morning. She missed practice, and Bill plugged me into the first 8, and I never came out. Right. and my entire life would be different, because I think if I wasn't in that top 8, probably wouldn't have decided to row at St. Joe's and walk on. I wouldn't be on the podcast with you right now. So go to practice, be there, and be available to work hard.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. And again, the getting sick thing and being out and stuff like that, like I'm sure you know this too with just being a part of any team. Like young people, seems like they get sick every other week, right? Like, and okay, well, can you manage that a little bit with getting enough sleep and recovering and being a little bit more proactive in, kind of getting to bed on time, saying no to different things that are maybe during the weekdays, right? You have your opportunity to relax a little bit on Saturday, right? Like managing your time a little bit, especially in the winter months where, again, you are more susceptible to a week long or 2 week long sickness, which again, if you're questioning why your ERG scores may not be where you thought they were come March, right? Usually it's because you missed some time, right? So I think that's a big one. The last thing I wanted to dive into a little bit, right? We can kind of keep it to our normal hour-ish conversation, but I think the one thing I wanted to think about, right, as I kind of think about a lot of things that are going through my head. You're out in Michigan. I'm here in Philadelphia. I have my winter crew coming in 3 or 4 days, right? I guess when this podcast comes out, we'll be one day into our January program. You'll be into your season, into your spring semester. But one thing that I know we're both passionate about that I think will be fun to dive into maybe for another 10 minutes or so, but you're in Michigan, I'm in Philly, it's cold. We're going to be spending a lot of time on the erg, right? And a lot of people are going to be spending a lot of time on the erg, right? A lot of the high school programs are going to be spending a lot of time on the erg. You and I are people who kind of have, I erg almost every day, right? I know you erg a lot when you're not doing your running and training like that. We both just did our normal Christmas Eve 10, 20K, 2 weeks ago, whatever it is, right? So we embrace the erg as something that we understand is valuable. We appreciate the benefits they can give us on a rowing front, but just in terms of how it affects how we feel after and as our primary modality for training. Not many, I don't want to say not many, but a large portion of athletes, especially at the high school level, but even at the college level as well, don't share that same appreciation for the erg the way that people like you and I do. And a lot of people out there, right? The people who truly have success, right? We both understand the importance of being on the erg. And one of the things I wanted to kind of bring up was like using this opportunity as you bridge the gap from 2024 to 2025 as an opportunity. And this goes for masters rowers as well, high school rowers, college rowers, your rowers, my rowers, right? Changing your mindset about the training that you need to do, right? Need to do on the erg in the winter to put yourself in the fitness position that you want to be entering the spring season. Like this is the time to do it. You have to spend time on the erg. Every coach is going to tell you that. But you have to change your mindset in order to get the most out of it. Or at least you have to influence your appreciation, right? Or your mindset towards it. What are some of your thoughts on that front? What are ways that athletes here in January can start to think a little bit differently about the work that they are required to do on the erg each and every day at practice, changing their frame of mind, having a better approach to it, understanding its value? What are some of your initial thoughts on that? This is something that I'm very curious about and something I love talking about, but I'd be curious to hear your thoughts as well.
I think the biggest thing that really changed my mindset around the erg was just the idea that no one's actually making me do this, right? Like even if you're on a team and you're on scholarship, no one's making you do it. You can always make the choice to not be a part of that. So when you frame it that way, it's like, I'm doing this because I like it. I love the sport. I mean, if you really do love the sport, right? And that's a gut check moment for some people. If you love rowing, erging's a part of that. And it's a necessary path to the water in the spring for almost every program in the country in some capacity. Even the warm weather crews are taking time to come inside and use the erg, even if it's for a shorter amount of time than, maybe us up in Michigan, right? So thinking of it that way, no one's making you do it but you. Okay. Um, and it's really a great tool for not only fitness development, but just personal development. Being able to endure something that is hard and boring. Um, that's like we live in a society that's just got, stuff coming at us all the time. You can open your phone and scroll through TikTok and scroll through Instagram and get all these quick hits of dopamine or whatever. And the erg, you don't get it until you're done. You get that good feeling when the workout's over. It's that like delayed gratification, which can really help you in a lot of other areas in life, as you probably know. I do for sure. Like, I can endure a lot more long, boring, monotonous work probably because of the erg. So frame it that way, and frame it as, like you said, this is a way to get fast. This is a way, part of the path towards, if your team's goal is to win, that's a necessary part of the path. I think, was it Brian Volpenheim that was talking about on the podcast, like, if all things are equal, the person with the faster erg is going to win. So, you can be the best technical rower in the world, but if you line up with someone whose technical ability is equal to yours and their erg's faster, they're going to win more than likely.
Yeah, no, and I think there's so much, and that's one of those things where it's like people don't love to say it, and I think coaches kind of echo it as well. And I think this is a negative thing, but like, where it's like, oh, like no one likes the erg, or you don't need to like the erg, or this sort of thing. And like, hey, you may never love it. Like, I love it, right? Like, I wouldn't be sitting here on this podcast with you if it wasn't for the erg. Like, I love it. I'm not the fastest, never will be. Don't really care at this stage of my life, but I still erg every day. Every day. I aim for every day. All right. Sometimes I land on like 5 or 6 times a week, right? But it's something that brings me value because I don't think there's a better modality for getting the fitness stimulus that I want, right? I don't get it necessarily from other areas, right? I love being on the machine, right? Not everyone needs to be like that, right? You obviously love it, right? Like, you wouldn't be doing it 10 years out of college, whatever it is, 8 years, I'll be right? Like, you wouldn't be doing it, years out of when you needed to if you didn't love it, right? And I think for high school athletes out there, college athletes as well, it's like, how can you truly understand it, right? Can you think a little bit deeper about why you're doing specific workouts? What's the intent behind that workout? How should you strategically navigate that workout? Because guess what? As much as I love the erg, I probably wouldn't love it if I was 17 workouts in a row where I started out hot and I was slopping along miserably like a fish out of water struggling for air in every workout that I ever do, right? Because I don't understand pacing, right? I understand inconsistency, right? And this is something that's massive for high school athletes, where it's like, I've had athletes who are seniors, right? They're seniors in high school, 4 years of rowing. They don't know how to set a drag factor. They don't know, they can't row feet out. They can't pull the same stroke 2 times in a row. They start out, at a split that's completely unsustainable. They fly up to some split that's completely away from where they should be, and then they bring it down at the end because they finally see the light at the end of the tunnel and they can sprint to the finish, right? No coach is going to advise that you erg that way, right? So thinking a little bit more about what takes place before the workout to better position you for a successful workout is one way where you can at least inch closer to our relationship that we have with the machine, right? You're not going to get there if you not purposefully, but just through how you do it, it just naturally happens. If you make every workout a miserable experience because you don't know how to pace yourself, right? Because you don't know how to pull, a certain rate or a certain split and repeat that over and over and over and over, right? Once you bridge that gap, you at least understand what you're walking into every time, right? You could tell me any workout, right? You can throw any workout at me today, and I'm going to know exactly what I feel like is a sustainable pace for me as someone who graduated 10 years ago from college and hasn't had to erg in 10 years, right? Like, I'm going to know exactly what I should be holding even at this stage of my life because I put in the reps, I put in the time. And I may not love that workout, right? If you told me 5 by 5 minutes open rate, go, right? Like I may not love that workout, but I know in the back of my mind an exact split that I can hold as a 30-plus-year-old, coach who doesn't need to erg, right?
Yeah.
So high school athletes, especially high school athletes, can begin to develop that same relationship with it, but they got to start at the bottom level, right? Can you pull, rate 20 at 25 splits above 2K for 10 minutes straight, right? And be 90% consistent at holding that, right? If you only think about, hey, I want to be, if I'm a high school girl, I want to be under 740 for 2K, and that's all you think about, you're not thinking about the process to be able to get there and the time that you have to put it in, right? And a talented athlete can pull that in their sleep, right? Most athletes kind of have to go through that barrier to entry because I think that talented athlete loses a lot in the process because they rely on that talent, that terrible execution for a 2K, and all they're focused on is the raw number at the end of it versus how they actually got to that number, right? Was it strategically appropriate? Like, and that's how you can set yourself, right? So I'm going on a tangent. I know we're only spending a little bit of time on this one, but that's one that I really love. It's like change your mindset by controlling what you can control to better
Yep.
position yourself for it, right? Because you and I, any workout, we know what we can do, right?
Yep.
And neither of us are, the Olympians, right? And all these people who need to be on the erg in order to perform. You ask those guys exactly what you should do. Like, hey, whoever, right? You're doing, 3 by 2K at this pace, like they know exactly what they should be doing. They know exactly what rate they should probably hold. They know exactly how they should execute the first two pieces so that the last piece can be a little bit faster, but they put in the time, right?
Yep.
And a lot of that time, and I know you love this, but a lot of that time is spent doing the really boring stuff that no one wants to, that on the paper, on the surface, no one wants to do,
Yep.
right? The 40 minutes, the 80 minutes, all of it at rate 20 at 20 splits above 2K, this and that. They spent that time, but now they know exactly what they should be doing for any workout. Anyway, any last thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was thinking about if you're coming off the machine every day and feeling miserable, more than likely you're probably going too hard on every session, and that's also something like, talking to your coach, having a dialogue with your coach, letting them know how you're feeling. Because I don't know about you, like I'm at the point where steady state's quite enjoyable for me to do. It's not taxing on your body, really. Like it's pretty easy. But it's boring. Like it's long and boring, like you said. Like it's like you have to find other ways to make it fun. For me, it's usually like music is a big one for me on long steady state. If I have a new playlist or something good that I want to listen to, like 80 minutes can fly by. And I enjoy that. Um, but then every once in a while, you do have to sprinkle in the hard stuff. And those are the days where you probably come off and you're like, but like I would say, 9 times out of 10, I get off the erg, I feel great. I mean, like really solid session. So if you're coming off every day and feeling miserable, probably going too hard on some of those days. Some of it should be relatively enjoyable. So
Yeah, I think that's a huge, like, again, like I like, and how are you manipulating? Like, how is that being influenced, right? Like, you're putting yourself in that position where it is an unbearable workout. And then the way you feel after that workout is going to influence how you feel as you approach the next one. And now you're going into the next one knowing that you're going to be miserable after because you haven't learned, right? Like it comes back to those kinds of things, right? It becomes that
yeah,
constant cycle of bad experience, don't like the next one. Because I don't like the next one, I have another bad experience, and it's a constant cycle versus, hey, if you just take the time, and this is why I really love like athletes who erg on their own away from the boathouse, because when you're at the boathouse or in the erg room, you're usually thinking about what your teammates are doing, right? Hey, I want to try to beat that person, even though I have no understanding of if that's a sustainable pace or not, right? But when you erg on your own, you're not being influenced by the things around you. You can focus on technique. You can focus on consistency. You can focus on breathing and flow and throw on some good music, right? Like I try to erg sometimes to an audiobook. I don't like it. It's not fun to me, right? I can't pay attention as it is without when I'm just walking in the park. And I definitely can't pay attention when I'm, doing 60 minutes on the erg, right? I love music, right? I'll throw in some music. And if I find a really good flow to it, right, as we talked about in our Christmas 20K, right, the music kind of got me through that piece, right? Every once in a while, a good song will come on and I'd be like, okay, I got another 4 minutes in me, right?
Yep.
Like, what are ways that you can manage it, right? And then when the environment's the way that you want it to be, now you can actually hone in on how are you moving on the machine? How's the body feel? Are you consistent? Are you pulling the same stroke? Okay, can I go a little bit firmer for 3 minutes and see how that feels, right? Like, you can start to play those games rather than being influenced by, I'm in a cold boathouse with 30 teammates who also hate the erg, and now we all have to do this miserable workout together, and our coach is going to tell us that no one likes the erg, you're okay, right? Like, okay, fast forward 3 months, you're on the water and you're not winning any races, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yep.
because you didn't spend the time doing the stuff that's truly necessary. Anyway, Delaney, I feel like that's a great place to close
Love
it out. I think, we always, that's why I love these episodes, because I usually end up on some kind of, fun little rant about erging or training or recruiting or something like that. And you're the perfect person to have that conversation with. But any last things on your mind? Any, I know, right, we were talking a little bit before about Instagram and getting, keeping active on Instagram for you as a coach, and, encouraging other athletes to probably follow your account to learn a little bit about Eastern Michigan and also just rowing education in general. We were talking about that a little bit before, but talk a little bit about how athletes can find you as the recruiting coordinator, coming back to our, full circle with our original conversation, but close things out for us if you don't mind.
Yeah, I'm on Instagram. I'm sure you can probably link to.
Yeah, we'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah. Instagram's great. You can DM me on Instagram, email. My email's on our website, Eastern Michigan Rowing. We're also doing a junior day in March, so that's another one. Keep an eye out. Programs are going to start putting stuff out for, opportunities to come to campus and meet the coaching staff and learn more about the program. So we're excited to do that again. It was really successful for us last year. So if you're listening and you want to learn more about Eastern Michigan and step foot on campus, it's on March 15th. It's a Saturday. And you'll get a tour of our facilities and everything and get to spend some time talking to us as coaches. So, good luck in the new year. Bring energy to the erg. And have fun training.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you so much, Delaney. This was a blast. Good luck as you guys, Eastern Michigan, all you guys get up and running here starting, this upcoming week. And then obviously we'll have you on before the spring season starts up, obviously, maybe sometime, in and around, your trip to, your team's trip to Alabama. Maybe we do something, right after that, but we'll definitely, do that. You're as a recurring guest on the At the Thousand podcast. So Delaney, again, good luck as you guys kick off the spring, or the spring semester. And we'll have you back on. We'll chat soon.
Thanks, guys.